Across the vast expanse of 7 star systems, the renowned bounty hunter, Halt Carver, had encountered a multitude of bizarre spectacles during his 52 years of galactic wandering. He had confronted Krellian pirates amidst the chaotic asteroid belts of Nexus Prime. He had endured a harrowing 3 weeks marooned on the frigid ice moon of Vantaris, armed with naught but a malfunctioning plasma cutter and sheer resilience. On one occasion, he had even engaged in an arm wrestling match with a Balakian mining foreman and emerged victorious, a feat that defied physical plausibility, considering Balakians possess bone density 4 times that of humans. He had sampled fermented Jovian slug nectar, a dubious delicacy that left him regretting his choice for approximately 72 hours. Yet, despite his extensive catalog of oddities, absolutely nothing had prepared him for the extraordinary sight that now greeted him on the ochre plains of Zephyrus 9. Before him stood 5 women, their skin a vibrant shade of purple, their hair spun gold, and from their backs unfurled magnificent bat-like wings. Their eyes, like the energy conduits of his ancient revolver, pulsed with a radiant cyan glow. They were arrayed in a line, their gazes fixed upon him, their expressions a spectrum from outright hostility to cautious curiosity, and in one instance, a flicker of something akin to profound hope. Each was clad in armor that seemed more organically grown than meticulously crafted, composed of polished plates of bronze and silver that gleamed under the dual glare of the overhead suns. Their wings, folded behind them like living cloaks, shimmered with an iridescent brilliance, shifting through a kaleidoscope of patterns with every subtle movement. Their beauty was of a kind that resonated deep within his chest, a poignant ache that stemmed from a vivid reminder of someone he had spent 2 decades desperately trying to erase from his memory. They were dragon women, or Vicari, as they referred to themselves, a civilization so ancient their origins predated human interstellar travel by millennia, the custodians of knowledge that dwarfed humanity's nascent understanding of the cosmos. In his entire existence, Halt had encountered but a single Vicari, and that encounter had occurred 20 years prior, on a night he had strived with all his might to forget, yet had spectacularly failed to do so. "Halt Carver," the tallest among them announced, stepping forward. Her voice possessed the same captivating musicality he recalled, an ethereal harmonic undertone characteristic of Vicari speech, as if each word was being simultaneously intoned by 3 distinct voices. "Your presence is more elusive than a frost serpent in the Calarian deserts." Instinctively, Halt's hand drifted towards the worn leather holster of his revolver, a nervous tick honed by decades of precarious survival. His fingers grazed the familiar texture of the holster, finding a measure of solace in its comforting weight. "Depends on who's asking," he replied, his voice carefully modulated, striving for neutrality despite the frantic drumming of his heart. "And for what purpose?" The speaker regarded him intently with those luminous eyes. For a fleeting moment, a subtle expression flickered across her features. Perhaps disappointment, or merely weariness. He discerned her youth. By Vicari standards, they were all barely adults, placing them roughly between 18 and 22 years of age in human terms. The implication struck him with the force of a physical blow. 20 years. "My designation is Yazur," the tall Vicari continued, seemingly unperturbed by his sudden intake of breath. "These are my sisters, Thieska, Brintha, Corinth, and Velmora." She indicated each in turn, one whose muscular build and scarred arms bespoke years of rigorous combat training, another, with a gentler mien and eyes that seemed to penetrate his very soul, a third, adorned with what appeared to be a scientist's utility belt, laden with an array of intriguing gadgets, and finally, the youngest, who observed him with undisguised fascination, her head tilted slightly in a manner that sent a jolt through his heart. "We have journeyed a considerable distance to find you, Halt Carver. Our mother often spoke of you." "Your mother?" Halt echoed, the words sounding alien and distant in his own ears. The desert wind gusted, sweeping sand and grit across the desolate landscape. He felt an overwhelming sense of age and profound exhaustion. "Queen Shriya of Vearis," Yazir clarified, "though I suspect you knew her simply as Shriya." The name struck him with the impact of a physical blow. Suddenly the barren plains of Zephyrus 9 dissolved, and he was transported back to a dimly lit cantina on Meridian Station, 20 years younger and demonstrably more foolish, witnessing the arrival of the most captivating woman he had ever laid eyes upon. She had been traveling incognito, a fact Holt had been unaware of at the time. Her wings had been concealed beneath a specially designed cloak, her regal markings obscured by simple traveler's garb. Yet, her every movement exuded an effortless grace, a confident poise mingled with an almost playful allure that had drawn his attention from across the crowded room. She had evinced an insatiable curiosity about everything: the human beverages, the human music, the peculiar human customs that must have seemed utterly alien to someone hailing from a world of crystalline spires and celestial courts. He recalled her reaction to the bitter Terran whiskey, a grimace that somehow conveyed both disgust and delight. He remembered her inquiries about Earth, a planet he had never actually set foot upon, and how he had fabricated elaborate tales simply to witness the wonder ignite in her eyes. He vividly recalled her laughter, rich and melodious, a sound so unexpected amidst the rough-and-tumble atmosphere of that seedy establishment frequented by smugglers and outlaws. They had conversed for hours. She had found amusement in his often terrible jokes and regaled him with accounts of her homeworld's cloud cities, momentarily banishing the persistent loneliness that had become his constant companion. She spoke of crystalline forests that sang in the wind, of oceans suspended in the sky, and of vibrant festivals where her people danced amongst the stars. When she finally revealed her true nature, unfurling those magnificent wings within the privacy of his rented chambers, he had felt no fear. He had been utterly awestruck. That single, extraordinary night had been the closest approximation of magic Holt had ever experienced in a life conspicuously devoid of it. "Are you all right there, old man?" The sharp, suspicious tone ripped him back to the present reality. It was the warrior, Thieska, her hand resting on what appeared to be a blade forged from crystallized energy. "You look like you've seen a specter." "Give him a moment, Thieska," the gentle one, Brintha, interjected softly. "This must be quite a shock." "A shock?" Holt repeated, a sound escaping him that was a strange blend of a laugh and a groan. "Lady, I've had bounties plastered on my head by 6 different criminal syndicates. I've been shot, stabbed, frozen, incinerated, and once I was fed to a swamp creature that unceremoniously regurgitated me because my nutritional profile apparently clashed with its digestive system. I've been pronounced deceased on 2 separate occasions, only to defy the universe's finality and return both times. But this," he gestured helplessly at the 5 figures before him, their purple skin, golden hair, and those unnervingly familiar blue eyes. "This might actually be the end of me." "You are considerably more theatrical than our mother described," Corinth observed, her head tilted in a manner that brought a pang of painful recognition of Shreya. She possessed the same analytical gaze, the same uncanny ability to perceive the underlying mechanics of things. "She mentioned you were stoic." 20 years ago I was stoic," Holt admitted weakly. "Now I'm just weary." Velmora, the youngest, had been circling him with an open, inquisitive air, her gaze meticulously cataloging his battered armor, his weathered face, the streaks of gray in his dark hair. She noted the scars etched upon his hands, the calluses adorning his fingers, and the subtle forward cant of his posture, indicative of perpetual readiness for action. "Are you truly our father?" she inquired, her voice devoid of any hostility, instead conveying a profound sense of wonder and a peculiar, almost hungry curiosity. "Are you truly him?" The word resonated within him more powerfully than any previous revelation. Father. He had never been anyone's father. He had never even contemplated such a possibility. The life of a bounty hunter was antithetical to family, to attachment, to anything that could be exploited as a vulnerability. He had learned that harsh lesson at a tender age, witnessing the annihilation of his entire unit during a disastrous coalition mission. His existence had since been meticulously constructed around the principle of never having to endure such a loss again. And yet, here stood 5 daughters he had never known existed, on an alien desert, informing him that their mother, the woman he had spent 2 decades attempting to forget, was their queen. "Why?" he managed finally, his voice raspy. "Why are you here? Why now, after all this time?" The sisters exchanged a series of glances, and the nascent levity dissipated like mist in the desert sun. Yazer's expression hardened, settling into a grim mask that mirrored his own battle-hardened countenance, the one he assumed when circumstances were dire and ambiguity had no place. "Because our mother is in grave peril," she stated plainly. "Because our people are under siege by the Korathian Dominion, and our Council of Elders has capitulated to save themselves. Our mother has been apprehended and is held within the fortress of Kulraknir. The Dominion's Grand Admiral has issued an ultimatum: surrender completely within 30 standard days, or witness the execution of your queen. And we have precisely 12 days remaining," Thieska added somberly. "We require your assistance," Brinta pleaded, her gentle voice trembling slightly. "Our mother always said, she always told us that if we ever found ourselves in dire need, we should seek you out. She maintained you were the only human she had ever met who truly honored his word." Halt gazed at them, his mind racing. The Korathian Dominion. The name was chillingly familiar. Every inhabitant of the outer systems knew of the Dominion. They were an empire forged through relentless conquest and brutal subjugation, their fleets a metallic plague sweeping across the galaxy, consuming lesser civilizations and plundering their resources. If they had turned their avaricious gaze towards Vikari. "Your mother," he began slowly. "She told you to find me. She remembered me." "Remembered you?" Corinth emitted a sound that could have been a laugh. "She named a constellation after you. The Hunter of the Eastern Sky. It ascends every spring above the crystalline spires, and she used to take us to the observatory to witness its appearance." Something within Halt's chest fractured, a long-frozen edifice of emotion finally beginning to yield. He recalled that final morning, watching Saretha sleep in the subdued luminescence of the station's artificial dawn, her wings wrapped around her like a comforting blanket. He had remained there for an hour, etching every detail of her face into his memory, acutely aware that she had to return to her world, and he, to continue his flight from his own past. He remembered the urge to wake her, to speak, to implore if there was, perhaps, another path. But cowardice had prevailed, and he had left only a note, a decision he had replayed countless times since, wondering what might have transpired had he possessed the courage to remain. 20 years, he murmured, the words heavy in the desert air. She could have located me at any point within those 20 years. Why didn't she? Yazer's expression softened, a subtle shift. She made attempts. After our births, after she ascended to the throne, she dispatched search parties across half the galaxy. But you, Halt Carver, were exceptionally adept at disappearing. You altered your ship's registration 17 times. You operated under 9 different aliases. You spent 3 years on a planet entirely beyond the Dominion surveillance network. She paused, and a note of respect entered her voice. And then the war commenced, and she could not depart. And she hesitated. We were unaware you were our father until 3 years ago. Mother kept that secret even from us. She claimed she was protecting you. Protecting me from what? From our grandfather, Thieska stated flatly. The former king. He would have pursued you across the stars and torn out your spine for disgracing his daughter. She paused, then added, as if in contemplation. He likely would have resorted to more abhorrent acts first, and then proceeded with the dismemberment. He was renowned for his meticulousness. Thieska scoffed. Indeed. You recall our grandfather's temperament. He is deceased now, Corinth added helpfully. So that is no longer a pressing concern? A protracted and agonizing illness claimed him 4 years ago? Or so the healers reported. He was not a benevolent individual. Halt absorbed this cascade of information, his mind struggling to reconcile the extraordinary reality unfolding before him. 5 daughters, a queen in jeopardy, an invading empire, and a constellation named in his honor, for goodness sake. Allow me to confirm my understanding, he said finally. You require my assistance, a dilapidated bounty hunter with a derelict vessel and more adversaries than allies, to rescue the sovereign of an entire planet from the heavily fortified stronghold of one of the galaxy's most formidable military powers. Yes, all 5 replied in unison, their voices weaving together in that characteristic Vicari harmony, with 12 days to accomplish it. 11 days and 16 hours, actually, Corinth corrected, producing a compact device from her belt. I am actively monitoring the countdown. We have already expended 4 hours locating you on this inconsequential dust ball of a planet. And you sought me out because your mother once vouched for my trustworthiness." Yazer stepped closer, and for the first time Halt perceived Shriya's features clearly reflected in her daughter's face. The same resolute set of the jaw, the same fiery intensity burning within those alien eyes. "We have come to you because we have no other recourse," she stated quietly. "The noble houses have abandoned us. Our military forces are fragmented. Our allies are too intimidated by the Dominion to offer intervention. We 5 are all that remains of the Royal Guard, and we have been in constant flight for 2 months." Her voice faltered, a mere whisper. "We came to you because our mother believed in you, because she loved you, and because you represent our last vestige of hope." The words hung suspended between them, laden with desperation and an unfamiliar, almost terrifying, weight of faith. 20 years prior, Carver had abandoned the only woman he had ever truly loved, driven by a profound fear of the cost of emotional entanglement. For 2 decades, he had evaded the repercussions of that decision, burying himself in clandestine bounties, boisterous bar brawls, and the monotonous gray existence of perpetual survival. He had convinced himself of his self-sufficiency, that attachment was a weakness, and hope a delusion for those who had not yet learned the harsh realities of life. Yet here stood his daughters, daughters he had never known, daughters who gazed at him with their mother's eyes, imploring him to transcend the timidity that had defined him. And somewhere, within a fortress guarded by a formidable army, Sertha waited, still holding on to her belief in him after all this time, still harboring hope. Halt drew a deep breath, feeling a profound shift within him, something ancient and corroded finally beginning to stir. "Very well," he declared. "Tell me everything. Beginning with how precisely your mother ascended to the throne when she claimed to be the daughter of a minor noble fleeing an arranged marriage." Thieska emitted a snort. "That was her fabrication for you. The minor noble's daughter Rus. She was, in fact, 6th in line for the throne at that juncture," Brintha explained apologetically. "However, a succession crisis, a devastating plague, and a series of unfortunate accidents involving the preceding heirs created a rather different political landscape. Circumstances evolved." "Circumstances," Halt repeated, his tone flat. "Royal politics can be rather convoluted," Corinth commented with a shrug. "The crucial point is that she has proven to be an exceptional queen. Our people adore her. The Dominion specifically targets her because if they break her, they shatter our resolve." "Then we shall not permit them to break her," Halt stated, a newfound resolve in his voice that caused all 5 women to stand a little straighter. "Now, I require every detail concerning this fortress, the Dominion's military capabilities, your people's resources, and precisely how ill-conceived this entire endeavor must be to possess even a remote chance of success." The voyage to Vikari spanned 6 days aboard Halt's aging freighter, the Wandering Star. The vessel, clearly having seen better epochs, was held together by a precarious combination of sheer willpower and prayer, with actual engineering playing a secondary role. Nevertheless, it boasted a functional faster-than-light drive, and an array of concealed compartments sufficient for smuggling an entire army through customs, a feature that, given the current circumstances, seemed remarkably apt. Those 6 days constituted the most peculiar period of Halt's life. He learned that Yazer possessed an innate strategic acumen, having orchestrated resistance operations since her mother's capture, coordinating the remnants of the Vikari loyalist forces with a chilling efficiency that belied her youth. She reminded him of the most capable officers he had served under during his coalition tenure, decisive, adaptable, and utterly unwavering in her commitment to her people's protection. Thieska proved to be as formidable as her appearance suggested. Trained since childhood in her people's warrior traditions and harboring a rage against the Dominion potent enough to power a small star, she would engage in rigorous sparring sessions with imaginary adversaries in the cargo bay, her crystalline blade whistling through the air. Halt found himself grudgingly impressed by her raw talent, but more so by her unwavering discipline. Brintha emerged as a healer, her inherent gentleness masking a fierce protectiveness of her sisters that could transform into unyielding resolve in an instant. Much of the journey was dedicated to tending to the minor injuries sustained during their flight from Vicari. Halt observed that she consistently offered words of kindness to everyone, including himself, as if intuitively sensing his discomfort with this unexpected influx of family into his solitary existence. Corinth, a scientist and engineer, dedicated most of the voyage to enhancing the wandering star's aging systems to an astonishing degree. By the third day, the engines operated with a 30% increase in efficiency. The life support circulated air that no longer tasted of recycled perspiration, and she had somehow coaxed the food synthesizer into producing sustenance that bore a semblance of actual food. And Velmora. Velmora was the inquisitive one, the observer, the one who perceived details others overlooked. She meticulously cataloged and analyzed everything with her quiet, thoughtful eyes, storing information for future reference. She uncomfortably reminded Halt of himself at that age, perpetually watching, perpetually waiting, perpetually striving to comprehend the world before it inflicted harm. It was Velmora who found him in the cargo bay on the fourth night, his gaze fixed upon a faded photograph he had carried in his jacket pocket for 2 decades. "Is that Mother?" she inquired softly, settling beside him with a gentle rustle of her wings. Her presence exuded a comforting warmth, and Halt found himself surprisingly unbothered by the intrusion. He nodded, unable to trust his voice. The photograph depicted Shreya on Meridian Station, captured mid-laughter at something he had said, her eyes alight with a joy he had never quite felt worthy of. "She is beautiful," Mora murmured. "She is," Halt corrected automatically, then caught himself. "It has been a long time. Corinth mentioned you remained absent because you were fleeing from something in your past." Halt's jaw tightened. "Your sister is exceptionally astute. She makes that assertion as well." Mora was silent for a moment, her wings shifting slightly as she settled more comfortably. "We discovered your old records, you know. After Mother revealed who you were, Corinth infiltrated approximately 16 different databases." She glanced at him sidelong. "You served as a soldier once, in the Coalition Defense Force. There was an incident, a mission that went awry. Your entire unit." "I do not discuss that," Halt interjected sharply. The memories surged forth, unbidden. The screams, the fire, the faces of those he had failed to protect. Mora did not flinch. "I understand, but I believed you should know that we are aware, that we comprehend why you run." She reached out and gently touched his arm, her purple skin radiating a comforting warmth against his weathered flesh. "Mother once told us that the most courageous act a person can perform is not charging into battle. It is choosing to remain when every instinct urges you to flee. She said you imparted that wisdom to her." "I never taught her anything. I was only with her for 3 days. Sometimes, 3 days are sufficient to alter everything." Mora smiled, and in that moment it was undeniably Shreya's smile, warm, playfully mischievous, and utterly disarming. "Besides, here you are, remaining, even when every fiber of your being likely urges you to flee." She left him to his photograph and his reflections. Halt remained in the dimness of the cargo bay, feeling the gradual erosion of the protective barriers he had painstakingly erected around himself. "All right," he conceded, his voice resonating with a newfound resolve. "Tell me everything. Starting with how your mother managed to become queen when she presented herself to me as the daughter of a minor noble escaping an arranged marriage." Thieska let out a soft snort. "That was indeed her fabricated narrative for you. She was, in fact, 6th in line for the throne at the time," Brintha clarified with an apologetic tone. "However, a succession crisis, coupled with a devastating plague, and a series of unfortunate events befalling the heirs in front of her, significantly altered the political landscape. Circumstances evolved." "Circumstances," Halt repeated flatly. "Royal politics can be rather complex," Corinth remarked with a shrug. "The essential aspect is that she has proven to be an exceptional monarch. Our people hold her in high esteem. The Dominion specifically targets her because if they manage to break her spirit, they will shatter our resistance." "Then we shall ensure they do not succeed," Halt declared, a newfound conviction in his voice that prompted all 5 women to straighten their postures slightly. "Now, I require comprehensive details regarding this fortress, the Dominion's military capabilities, your people's available assets, and a precise assessment of how audacious this plan must be to stand any chance of fruition. The journey to Vicari spanned 6 days aboard Holt's weathered freighter, the Wandering Star. The vessel, which had evidently seen more prosperous eras, was held together as much by sheer tenacity and whispered prayers as by functional engineering. Nonetheless, it possessed a functional, faster-than-light drive, and an ample supply of hidden compartments capable of concealing an entire army during customs inspections, a feature that, given the prevailing circumstances, seemed remarkably appropriate. Those 6 days proved to be the most peculiar of Halt's entire existence. He discovered that Yeazer possessed an innate strategic brilliance, having commanded resistance operations since her mother's capture, orchestrating the remaining Vicari loyalist forces with a cool efficiency that belied her youthful appearance. She reminded him of the most capable officers he had served with during his coalition service, decisive, adaptable, and utterly uncompromising when it came to protecting her people. Thieska proved to be precisely as formidable as her imposing presence suggested. Trained from childhood in her people's warrior traditions and harboring a deep-seated animosity towards the Dominion potent enough to power a small star, she would engage in rigorous sparring sessions with unseen adversaries in the cargo bay, her crystalline blades singing through the air, and Halt found himself impressed, despite his initial reservations. She possessed raw talent, but more importantly, she exhibited remarkable discipline. Brintha, it turned out, was a healer, her gentle nature concealing a fierce protectiveness of her sisters that could transform into unyielding steel in an instant. Much of their journey was dedicated to tending to the minor injuries they had sustained during their hasty escape from Vicari. Halt noticed that she always had a kind word for everyone, even for him, particularly for him, as if she could sense his inherent discomfort with this sudden intrusion of familial connection into his solitary existence. Corinth, a scientist and engineer, spent the majority of the journey optimizing the Wandering Star's aging systems to a degree that seemed almost miraculous. By the 3rd day, the engines were operating 30% more efficiently. The life support system was circulating air that no longer carried the unpleasant odor of recycled sweat, and she had somehow managed to persuade the food synthesizer to produce meals that bore a striking resemblance to actual food. And Velmora. Velmora was the persistent questioner, the keen observer, the one who noticed things others invariably missed. She meticulously cataloged and analyzed everything with those quiet, contemplative eyes, storing away information for future use. She uncomfortably reminded Holt of himself at that age, perpetually watching, perpetually waiting, perpetually trying to decipher the world before it had the chance to hurt him. It was Velmora who discovered him in the cargo bay on the 4th night, his gaze fixed upon a faded photograph he had kept concealed within his jacket pocket for 2 decades. "Is that Mother?" she inquired softly, settling beside him with a gentle rustle of her wings. Her presence was unexpectedly warm and comforting, and Halt found himself not minding the intrusion. He nodded, unable to trust his voice. The image depicted Shreya on Meridian Station, caught in a moment of genuine laughter at something he had said, her eyes luminous with a joy he had never quite believed he deserved. "She is beautiful," Mora murmured. "She is," Halt corrected automatically, then paused, realizing his slip. "It has been a long time. Corinth says you avoided returning because you were fleeing from something in your past." Halt's jaw tightened. "Your sister possesses an exceptional intellect. She makes that assertion as well." Mora remained silent for a moment, her wings shifting subtly as she grew more comfortable. "We managed to access your old records, you know. After Mother informed us of your identity, Corinth gained unauthorized access to approximately 16 different databases." She glanced at him obliquely. "You were once a soldier in the Coalition Defense Force. There was an incident, a mission that concluded disastrously. Your entire unit." "I do not speak of that," Halt interjected with uncharacteristic harshness. The memories surged forth, unbidden, the cacophony of screams, the consuming flames, the faces of those he had failed to protect. Mora did not recoil. "I understand, but I felt it was important for you to know that we are aware, that we comprehend your reasons for fleeing." She extended a hand and gently touched his arm, her purple skin radiating a comforting warmth against his weathered flesh. "Mother once told us that the most courageous act a person can perform is not to charge headlong into battle. It is the decision to stand firm when every impulse compels you to flee. She attributed that realization to you? I never imparted any wisdom to her. I was only with her for 3 days. Sometimes, a mere 3 days are sufficient to catalyze profound change. Mora smiled, and in that instant it was unmistakably Shriya's smile, warm, tinged with a playful mischief and utterly disarming. Besides, she added softly, you are here now, choosing to remain, even when every instinct within you probably screams for you to escape. She departed, leaving him alone with his photograph and his turbulent thoughts. Halt remained in the cavernous darkness of the cargo bay, feeling the foundations of the emotional walls he had painstakingly constructed over the years beginning to crumble. All right, he conceded, his voice carrying a newfound weight of resolve. Tell me everything. Beginning with precisely how your mother managed to attain the status of queen when she presented herself to me as the daughter of a minor noble escaping an arranged marriage. Thieska emitted a soft, disbelieving snort. That was indeed her fabricated narrative for you. She was, in reality, 6th in line for the throne at that particular juncture, Brintha clarified with an apologetic inflection. However, a destabilizing succession crisis, a devastating plague, and a series of unfortunate incidents involving the heirs positioned above her significantly altered the political landscape. Circumstances evolved. Circumstances, Halt repeated, his tone devoid of emotion. Royal politics can be exceptionally intricate, Corinth remarked with an indifferent shrug. The paramount consideration is that she has proven to be an exceptionally benevolent queen. Our people hold her in profound affection. The Dominion specifically targets her because if they succeed in breaking her spirit, they will irrevocably dismantle our resistance. Then we shall ensure they fail to achieve that objective, Halt declared, a new firmness in his voice that caused all 5 women to implicitly straighten their postures. Now, I require exhaustive details regarding this fortress, the Dominion's military capabilities, your people's available resources, and a precise evaluation of how profoundly ill-conceived this entire undertaking must be to possess even a marginal probability of success. The voyage to Vikari spanned 6 days aboard Holt's battered freighter, the Wandering Star. The ship, clearly having seen better centuries, was held together as much by sheer obstinacy and fervent prayers as by actual engineering. Nevertheless, it boasted a functional faster-than-light drive and an abundance of concealed compartments sufficient for smuggling an entire army through customs, a feature that, given the prevailing circumstances, seemed remarkably appropriate. Those 6 days proved to be the most peculiar of Halt's entire existence. He learned that Yeazer possessed an innate strategic brilliance, having orchestrated resistance operations since her mother's capture, coordinating the remaining Vikari loyalist forces with a cool efficiency that belied her youthful appearance. She reminded him of the most capable officers he had served with during his coalition service, decisive, adaptable, and utterly uncompromising when it came to protecting her people. Thieska proved to be precisely as formidable as her imposing presence suggested. Trained from childhood in her people's warrior traditions and harboring a deep-seated animosity towards the Dominion potent enough to power a small star, she would engage in rigorous sparring sessions with unseen adversaries in the cargo bay, her crystalline blades singing through the air, and Halt found himself impressed, despite his initial reservations. She possessed raw talent, but more importantly, she exhibited remarkable discipline. Brintha, it turned out, was a healer, her gentle nature concealing a fierce protectiveness of her sisters that could transform into unyielding steel in an instant. Much of their journey was dedicated to tending to the minor injuries they had sustained during their hasty escape from Vikari. Halt noticed that she always had a kind word for everyone, even for him, particularly for him, as if she could sense his inherent discomfort with this sudden intrusion of familial connection into his solitary existence. Corinth, a scientist and engineer, spent the majority of the journey optimizing the Wandering Star's aging systems to a degree that seemed almost miraculous. By the 3rd day, the engines were operating 30% more efficiently. The life support system was circulating air that no longer carried the unpleasant odor of recycled sweat, and she had somehow managed to persuade the food synthesizer to produce meals that bore a striking resemblance to actual food. And Velmora. Velmora was the persistent questioner, the keen observer. the one who noticed things others invariably missed. She meticulously cataloged and analyzed everything with those quiet, contemplative eyes, storing away information for future use. She uncomfortably reminded Halt of himself at that age, perpetually watching, perpetually waiting, perpetually trying to decipher the world before it had the chance to hurt him. It was Velmora who discovered him in the cargo bay on the fourth night, his gaze fixed upon a faded photograph he had kept concealed within his jacket pocket for 2 decades. "Is that Mother?" she inquired softly, settling beside him with a gentle rustle of her wings. Her presence was unexpectedly warm and comforting, and Halt found himself not minding the intrusion. He nodded, unable to trust his voice. The image depicted Shreya on Meridian Station, captured in a moment of genuine laughter at something he had said, her eyes luminous with a joy he had never quite believed he deserved. "She is beautiful," Mora murmured. "She is," Halt corrected automatically, then paused, realizing his slip. "It has been a long time. Corinth says you avoided returning because you were fleeing from something in your past." Halt's jaw tightened. "Your sister possesses an exceptional intellect. She makes that assertion as well?" Mora remained silent for a moment, her wings shifting subtly as she grew more comfortable. "We managed to access your old records, you know. After Mother informed us of your identity, Corinth gained unauthorized access to approximately 16 different databases." She glanced at him obliquely. "You were once a soldier in the Coalition Defense Force. There was an incident, a mission that concluded disastrously. Your entire unit—" "I do not speak of that," Halt interjected with uncharacteristic harshness. The memories surged forth, unbidden, the cacophony of screams, the consuming flames, the faces of those he had failed to protect. Mora did not recoil. "I understand, but I felt it was important for you to know that we are aware, that we comprehend your reasons for fleeing." She extended a hand and gently touched his arm, her purple skin radiating a comforting warmth against his weathered flesh. "Mother once told us that the most courageous act a person can perform is not to charge headlong into battle. It is the decision to stand firm when every impulse compels you to flee." She attributed that realization to you. "I never imparted any wisdom to her. I was only with her for 3 days. Sometimes, a mere 3 days are sufficient to catalyze profound change." Mora smiled, and in that instant, it was unmistakably Shreya's smile, warm, tinged with a playful mischief and utterly disarming. "Besides," she added softly, "you are here now, choosing to remain, even when every instinct within you probably screams for you to escape." She departed, leaving him to his photograph and his turbulent thoughts. Halt remained in the cavernous darkness of the cargo bay, feeling the foundations of the emotional walls he had painstakingly constructed over the years beginning to crumble. The following day, he commenced instruction on the art of combat, teaching them the brutal pragmatism of human warfare, its desperation, its lack of honor. He imparted knowledge on navigating hostile environments, discerning moments for attack versus concealment, and leveraging an adversary's strengths against them. Teska absorbed these fighting principles with remarkable alacrity, skillfully integrating them into her unique Vicari combat style, to the point of earning his admiration. Yazir displayed an innate aptitude for strategic planning, as if it were her very nature, a skill certainly honed by her leadership in the Resistance. Corinth found innovative applications for his tactics within the realm of technological warfare, a realization that filled him with a complex mix of age, slowness, and unexpected pride. Yet the most challenging lessons were reserved for Brinder, the healer who harbored no desire for violence, but who was coming to understand its grim necessity for safeguarding those she cherished. He observed her practicing disabling techniques, her face wet with tears, and the image of Sur, and the profound burden of being both compassionate and formidable, crossed his mind. "You aren't obligated to do this," he confided quietly on the 5th night. "There's no dishonor in remaining behind, offering your support." Brinder firmly shook her head. "My mother is held within that fortress. I refuse to stay hidden while my sisters risk everything to secure her freedom. I will not be absent when she needs me." Her gaze, which seemed to perceive far too much, met his. "You comprehend, do you not? The weight of not being present when it truly mattered." He did. By the stars, he did. On the 6th day, as they drew closer to the Vicari system, Hall found himself in the pilot's seat alongside Yazir, meticulously reviewing the assault strategy for the 100th time. "The internal resistance factions," he stated, his eyes fixed on the holographic representation of the fortress. "You place your trust in them with my life? With my mother's life?" Yazir's expression remained resolute. "They have been anticipating this opportunity for months. Servants and maintenance staff who feign loyalty to the Dominion while undermining them from within. Prisoners who have endured the Grand Admiral's cruelty without breaking. And this Grand Admiral, what do we know of him?" "Admiral Vazri Kol," Yazir replied, her voice chilled. "He was responsible for the subjugation of the Polarian system 5 years ago, eliminating their entire royal lineage as a deterrent. He is notorious for his psychological tactics, breaking spirits before bodies. He has been focusing on Mother for 2 months now." Hall's grip tightened on the console's edge. "Then we shall end him." Yazir studied him for a prolonged moment, a flicker of approval momentarily crossing her features. "You sound like Mother," she remarked. She vocalized the same sentiment before her capture, that she would witness Vazri Kol's downfall before Vicari's surrender. She paused, then added more softly, "I should have remained with her then. I should have fought to be by her side instead of fleeing." "You are here now," Yazir stated simply. "That is what counts." Vicari was engulfed in flames by the time they arrived. The Dominion fleet loomed in orbit like a predatory swarm, their weaponry glowing with readiness. Gigantic dreadnoughts bristled with formidable armaments, while smaller frigates maintained relentless patrol patterns. Below, on the planetary surface, Hall could discern the ravages of bombardment: shattered crystalline spires, fallen cloud cities, and forests of bioluminescent trees reduced to ash. The Vicari had not yielded easily. Their defiance had exacted a heavy toll on the Dominion. However, with their queen captive and their defenses crippled, even the most unyielding pockets of resistance were beginning to crumble. "The fortress of Kol Drashne," Corinth indicated, pointing to a colossal structure embedded in the mountainside. It appeared as a gaping wound in the landscape, all harsh angles and dark metal, utterly discordant with the organic beauty of the surrounding Vicari architecture. "That is where they are holding her. It boasts triple-layered shielding, a garrison of approximately 12,000 soldiers, and more automated defenses than I can enumerate. And our plan is to infiltrate and extract her," Hall stated plainly. "Actually, our strategy is considerably more intricate than that," Yazir countered, activating a holographic projection. The fortress expanded in luminous blue light, revealing internal pathways, access points, and guard schedules. "We have established contact with resistance cells within the fortress itself. Servants, maintenance personnel, prisoners who have yet to break. They have been meticulously charting the interior, identifying vulnerabilities, and preparing for precisely this kind of operation. How many combatants can you realistically muster?" Yazir's expression was grim. 47 plus us. 47 against 12,000? 48, she corrected, a fierce grin spreading across her face. "You are fighting too." "This is madness," Hall declared. "This is the most absurd undertaking I have ever agreed to, and I once assisted in smuggling a Praxian ambassador out of a syndicate black site using only a cargo lifter and a pouch of explosive fungi." "But you will still aid us," Velmora observed quietly. He looked at his daughters, these 5 formidable, courageous, improbable women who had traversed the galaxy to locate a father they had never known, who believed in him because their mother had believed in him, who were prepared to risk everything for the slim chance of her rescue. "Yes," he affirmed, "I will still help you." The assault on Kol Drachni would indeed become a legendary tale amongst the Vicari people, sung in ballads, depicted in paintings, and recounted to children for generations to come. The narrative of how the Queen's 5 daughters and the human hunter descended upon the impregnable fortress and breached it against all odds. The reality, as Hall experienced it, was far less heroic and considerably more terrifying. They infiltrated through a waste processing conduit that Corinth had identified as the fortress's sole unshielded entry point, as it seemed even the most sophisticated military engineers couldn't conceive that anyone would resort to swimming through half a mile of alien effluent out of desperation. Hall would have voiced his displeasure, but he had endured worse. Besides, the look of sheer revulsion on Teska's face as she waded through the muck was almost worth the stench. "If I survive this," Teska muttered, "I'm going to find whoever designed this tunnel and have a stern word with them." "Focus," Yezer hissed. "We are nearly through." The interior of the fortress was a labyrinth of identical corridors and security checkpoints, patrolled by Dominion soldiers lulled into complacency by their perceived certainty of victory. That complacency proved their undoing. Yezer's resistance contacts had executed their assignments flawlessly, providing security clearances, patrol schedules, and precisely timed diversions that sent responding units scrambling in confusion. They moved through the facility like phantoms, neutralizing guards with silent precision, Teska's crystalline blade a whisper through armor, while Brinther ensured their incapacitated foes merely slept, rather than died, whenever possible. Corinth had infiltrated the fortress's internal communication network, inundating Dominion channels with conflicting orders, and fabricated alerts that sent security teams chasing shadows. Mora, with her diminutive stature and natural stealth, scouted ahead of the group, identifying pathways and warning of impending dangers before they could be encountered. Yazer orchestrated it all with the composed focus of someone who had been preparing for this very moment her entire life. Hall found himself observing their actions with a sense of profound wonder. These were his daughters. These extraordinary, magnificent women were his flesh and blood. 20 years ago, he had abandoned Sir, convinced he had nothing to offer, that he was too damaged to be worthy of love. Now, he watched the children he had unknowingly fathered storm an enemy stronghold with courage, skill, and an unshakable devotion to one another. And he mused that perhaps, just perhaps, a small part of him had been worth passing on after all. The detention sector represented the most heavily fortified area of the facility, protected by energy barriers, automated turrets, and an entire company of elite Dominion troops. The resistance fighters launched their assault from concealed positions, drawing the enemy's attention outward, while Hall and his daughters advanced from behind. It devolved into utter pandemonium. Shouts, plasma fire, and the ethereal chime of Vicari blades cleaving through armor. Hall fought with a ferocity he hadn't summoned in decades, the old training returning in a surge of ingrained instinct and muscle memory. He was no longer the young soldier he once was, but experience counted for something, and he had acquired more cunning in 20 years of bounty hunting than most soldiers learned in a lifetime. He provided cover for Brinther as she rushed to tend to a wounded resistance fighter. He watched Teska's back as she carved through a contingent of Dominion shock troops. He neutralized a turret that had locked onto Corinth, the engineer too engrossed in her hacking interface to notice the imminent threat. And then they were through, the cell block stretching before them, and in the final cell at the corridor's end stood Sir. She remained standing as they approached, and Hall's breath hitched in his throat. 20 years had left their mark. Lines creased her face, silver threads wove through her golden hair, and a weariness resided in her eyes, speaking of burdens borne for too long. She was thinner than he remembered, with indentations on her wrists from the restraints she had worn, and her magnificent wings drooped at an angle that suggested old injuries left unhealed. Yet, she was still beautiful. She was still the woman who had found his terrible jokes amusing in a cantina on Meridian Station, who had revealed her wings in a rented room without offense at his wide-eyed stare. She was still Sir. "Mother," Yezer breathed, and she was already moving, her sisters flanking her, crowding around the energy barrier that separated them from their queen. Corinth's fingers danced across her device, and the barrier flickered and died. Then, the 5 daughters of the queen embraced their mother in a tangle of wings, tears, and fervent whispered promises. Hall stood back, observing, his heart performing an intricate dance within his chest. Then, Syrah looked up over her daughters' heads, her cyan eyes meeting his. "Hull," she said, her voice cracking on his name. "You came." "You named a constellation after me," he replied, his voice rougher than he intended. "Seemed rather impolite not to show up after that," she laughed. It was the same laugh he remembered, warm and slightly surprised, as if joy were always an unexpected visitor. "You've gone gray," she observed, "and you have wrinkles. You left me a note 20 years ago, A note stating you weren't good enough for me. I wasn't, Hall admitted. I'm still not. But I'm here regardless because apparently our daughters are even more obstinate than you are, and they weren't prepared to accept refusal. Sir's gaze shifted to her children, her eyes welling with tears. They found you after all this time. They found you. We learned stubbornness from you, Teska declared with a triumphant grin. And recklessness, apparently, since we're currently in the midst of an enemy fortress with approximately 15 minutes before reinforcements arrive. Then we should likely cease the sentimentality and commence our departure, Corinth added practically. They fled. The escape from Koldrachni proved more perilous than the infiltration. The Dominion, finally alerted to their presence, unleashed everything at their disposal to thwart them. However, the Resistance had contingency plans. As Hall and the others fought their way towards the extraction point, other cells erupted throughout the fortress, sowing chaos and confusion, sacrificing precious seconds with their lives. The wandering star waited in the shadow of a fallen watchtower. Engines primed, they scrambled aboard as plasma fire scorched the air around them. Hall slid into the pilot's seat with a familiarity forged over decades. The old freighter groaned and shuddered under his aggressive maneuvering, pushed harder than it had been in years. But it held together. It always held together when he needed it most. Behind them, the fortress of Koldrachna blazed. The transition to faster-than-light travel was the most breathtaking sight Hall had ever witnessed. The stars elongated into streaks of light as they left the Dominion fleet far in their wake. They had accomplished it. Against all odds, against all reason, they had actually done it. In the cargo bay, the surviving Resistance fighters tended to their injuries and mourned their fallen. The sisters clustered around their mother, reluctant to let her out of their sight, and Sira allowed their solicitous attention with an expression of profound and overwhelming affection. Hall remained in the cockpit, gazing at the stars, attempting to process the enormity of what had transpired. He wasn't sure how long he sat there before she found him. Long enough for the adrenaline to dissipate and exhaustion to set in, leaving him acutely aware of his 52 years. Sira slipped into the co-pilot's seat without a word, and for a time, they simply sat in silence, observing the spectacle of hyperspace. "They are remarkable," he said finally. "Our daughters." "They are," Sira agreed. "I wish you could have witnessed their upbringing. Yazar orchestrating mischief for the younger ones, Teska declaring war on a swarm of crystalline beetles that invaded her garden, Brindha tending to injured creatures, Corinth constructing her first engine at the age of 6, Velmora trailing everyone, observing everything with those quiet eyes. Why didn't you tell them about me?" Sira was silent for a long moment. "Because I was afraid," she admitted eventually. "My father would have killed you if he knew. And after he died, I convinced myself it was to shield them from disappointment. You had vanished so completely. I was certain you did not wish to be found. I thought it would be kinder to let them imagine a father than to know their real one had chosen to remain absent." "I was unaware," Hall stated quietly, "about them. If I had known, would it have altered anything?" The question lingered between them, heavy with 20 years of unspoken possibilities. "I don't know," he confessed honestly. "I want to say yes. I want to believe I would have been courageous enough to return, to strive to be someone better than I was. But I was so shattered back then, Sira. I had just lost everyone I cared about. I was convinced I was a destructive force, that everyone I loved would perish because of me. Walking away from you was the most agonizing decision I ever made, but I told myself I was doing it to keep you safe. And now," Hall turned to face her, and for the first time in 2 decades, he allowed her to see everything. The fear, the hope, and the desperate longing he had carried all this time. "Now, I have spent 6 days with our daughters. I have seen them fight, laugh, argue, and care for each other in ways that make my chest ache. I have seen you again, and you are even more incredible than I remembered. And I am 52 years old, bearing more scars than sensible thoughts, and I am utterly terrified of what lies ahead." Saratha reached out and took his hand, her purple fingers intertwining with his rough, calloused ones. "What lies ahead," she said softly, "is that we win this war. We expel the Dominion from my world and rebuild what they have ravaged. And then She squeezed his hand. We determine what we are to each other, not who we were 20 years ago. Those individuals are gone, but who we are now. If you want that, if I want that, Hall repeated, a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a sob escaping him. Sira, I have wanted that every single day since I left. I was simply too cowardly to believe I deserved it. You returned, she stated simply. When our daughters needed you, when I needed you, you could have refused. You could have vanished once more. But you chose to stay. Mora said something to me, he admitted, about how the bravest act isn't charging into battle. It's choosing to remain when every fiber of your being urges you to flee. She said, You taught her that. Sira smiled, and it was the same smile he remembered from that Meridian Station cantina, warm, slightly mischievous, and brimming with something that bore a striking resemblance to love. I learned it from someone, she said. A human bounty hunter who stayed by my side for 3 days when any sensible person would have fled, who made me laugh, held me close, and made me believe that perhaps the galaxy wasn't as cold as I'd thought. I recall that human being an idiot who didn't appreciate what he possessed until it was lost. Perhaps, Sira conceded aloud, but he is here now, and that is what matters. Hall leaned across the space between them, pressing his forehead against hers, a gesture he remembered from that night so long ago, a vicarious expression of profound intimacy that she had introduced him to. Her skin was warm, and she smelled of smoke, flowers, and something uniquely her. And for the first time in 20 years, the hollow ache in his chest began to recede. I'm going to mess this up, he warned her. I don't know how to be a father. I barely know how to be a person. Then we will figure it out together, Sira said. You, me, and 5 daughters who are likely eavesdropping just outside the door. A muffled thud and a whispered argument emanated from the corridor. We are not listening, Velmora's voice called out. Mora! Yezer hissed. Hall laughed, a genuine, unrestrained laugh, the first he had allowed himself in longer than he could recall. You said Yezer was the one who led them into mischief. She learned it from me, Sira admitted. She raised her voice. All of you, come in here. The door slid open immediately and 5 sheepish, dragon-like women filed in, their wings rustling awkwardly. Teska attempted to project dignity, largely unsuccessfully. Corinth was already pulling out her device to examine something. Brindler's eyes were suspiciously moist, and Yazer and Velmora exchanged glances suggesting a later discussion was in order. So, Hall said, looking at his family. And it was his family, he realized with a sense of profound awe. This improbable assembly of alien royalty and half-human daughters. What is the plan for reclaiming your planet? You are staying, Velmora asked, her hope unmistakable. Apparently, I am not permitted to leave, Hall stated dryly. Something about named constellations, stubborn daughters, and the minor detail of the Corinthian dominion currently occupying our homeworld, Corinth added. Yazer stepped forward, and when she spoke, she embodied the resistance leader, the heir to a throne, the daughter of a queen. Yet beneath it, Hall perceived the child who had grown up without a father, who had journeyed across the galaxy fueled by nothing but hope and her mother's stories. We rally our people, she declared. We leverage the inspiration of Mother's rescue to reignite the resistance. We strike the Dominion where they are most vulnerable and make them pay for every inch of Vicari soil they attempt to hold. And we demonstrate that we are not a people who surrender. We have allies in the outer systems, Sira added. Old treaties, old debts. The Dominion's expansion has alarmed many worlds. If we can show them that resistance is feasible, that the Dominion can be defeated, we might ignite a revolution, Hall finished, or we might perish quite dramatically. Those do appear to be the options, Teska agreed cheerfully. Brinther moved forward and gently touched Hall's arm. We are not asking you to fight for Vicari, she said. We are asking you to fight for us, for our family, for the chance at something better than running. Hall looked at his daughters. Fierce Yeza with her strategic mind, dangerous Teska with her warrior's heart, gentle Brinther with her healer's soul, brilliant Corinth with her engineering prowess, and observant Velmora with her quiet wisdom. He looked at Sir, the woman he had loved, lost, and somehow been given the chance to rediscover. 20 years ago, he had walked away believing he was unworthy. Now, he understood that worthiness was not defined by who you were, but by what you chose to be. It all came down to the path you decided to forge for yourself. "Very well," he declared, his tone exhibiting a newfound stability that hadn't been present for many years. "Let us embark on freeing a world." Sita's fingers intertwined with his once more, and the Queen's 5 offspring clustered around their progenitors, a joyous whirlwind of fluttering wings and unrestrained giggles, mingled with a sensation that felt both incredibly daunting and profoundly magnificent. A flicker of optimism. The struggle for Vicaris promised to be an arduous and demanding undertaking, one that would exact a significant toll. Victories would be achieved, and defeats would be endured, offerings would be given, and repercussions would be faced. Holt would confront adversaries he couldn't have conceived of, and he would discover companions in the most improbable of settings. He would come to grasp the essence of what it truly meant to be a parent. Through missteps and stumbles, through repeated attempts and corrections, through errors made and subsequently rectified, he would painstakingly cultivate the connections he had, for so long, been too apprehensive to cultivate. Yet, in that precise instant, within the confines of a weathered, aging cargo vessel, hurtling through the void of hyperspace towards an unknown destiny, Holt Carver finally grasped the wisdom Sertha had endeavored to impart to him 2 decades prior. Certain commitments were worth upholding. Certain individuals merited unwavering defense. And the opportunity for a renewed beginning was perpetually within reach.